me the share link so I can send it here and there.
Okay, it's saying preparing, setting up,
It should start
done.
in a few minutes.
It's done.
Yes, I receive meeting is now streaming live on
Mm.
YouTube.
For some reason, Zoom decided that you're the host, but anyway. So just send me the share link in Viber and
Okay. I started hearing twice. Okay. Now the streaming is on. I can see it. I can see you, each other. Everything is working.
okay. So we can start then discussing. So Henrik, welcome. Welcome to our, it's a special edition of our podcast because it's kind of part of the podcast, which is called Management Nightmares, but also it's a pre-event for our conference that is starting next week on Thursday, 26th. It's about business agility, and we are super happy to have you on board so we can discuss with you some
nightmares.
details about, let's say, the future of agility and Agile itself. So can you quickly introduce yourself? Because if I try, I'm not sure if I'm not going to miss a point. I see you have in your signature in LinkedIn lots of things that you are part of. And one thing I didn't see is Agile. This word is missing in your intro. So can you just provide a couple of sentences about you?
Yeah, so I'm Henrik. I'm a Swede. I'm in Sweden. 4 kids, teenagers, and I grew up in Tokyo, and was a software engineer for a bunch of years and became an entrepreneur, started some companies, and started experimenting with how to work effectively. And through that, I stumbled upon something that later on came to be known as Agile, and spent a couple of decades helping companies make this work in practice. So through that process, I wrote a few books and made some colorful videos and put out some case studies and stuff. And then at some point I made a switch and started working as a climate entrepreneur, working with companies that tried to combat climate change for a period. And then I switched again and worked as a Minecraft developer. Very different things I've been doing. But I guess the common theme has always been product development and software in one way or another. And then since the last couple of years, I've been focused almost entirely on AI because this is the new, shiny, interesting toy. And I think I'm going to be playing with this toy for quite a long time. So right now I'm involved in a few startups around AI, and I spend almost all my time developing AI products and teaching and training and doing talks and coaching around that area. So I don't really work actively within Agile itself anymore, but of course it's, to me, Agile is just a way of working. So I'm always carrying it with me, and I apply it in my day-to-day work with my teams.
Yeah,
Nice.
I see you in many Agile conferences yet still, so you are not totally abandoned it.
No, I've not abandoned Agile. It's just not my main focus right now, you could say.
Okay. I know that, sorry, Boggy, just to finish. So many people know you maybe from your Agile background with Spotify, etc., etc. So what's the reason behind? Is just that you want to go more on this AI and development stuff? This is what you're more interested, or you think Agile is kind of not so, how can I say, business savvy place, or I don't know.
I guess the reason why I got into Agile was because I got really excited about how helpful Agile is and how it as a tool can make a huge difference in a company. And that's kind of what happened with AI now. When I bumped into this technology and I started getting useful, I was like, wow, this is super useful. And it's really helping me a lot, and I want to help others learn how to make use of it. So, and also this is a very new evolving technology. Agile has been around a long time now. It's become sort of mainstream, although not very many companies do it that well. It's still, I felt that there's not as much development happening there. So I've always been a curious person. So I just follow my curiosity. And right now there's a lot of interesting, crazy stuff happening within the AI world. So that's kind of where it's taking me. But there is also some overlap because I help companies apply this technology. And when doing so, we try to analyze how they work today. What are their workflows and processes, and then kind of where can an AI agent help, for example. And that's kind of the same thinking around Agile, which is how do we work effectively? How do we get stuff done better? So there's definitely some overlap.
Mm.
Awesome. And by the way, we have a couple of folks here joined with us. Actually, this is a quite interesting way to do our Management Nightmares episode, because everybody is open to share question or thought or concern with you, with us. It's not mandatory only us to ask you questions. And actually, you can ask us questions if you want to.
That's great. I have a question right now. What's the nightmare?
We'll see. It's usually the nightmare of the guests. For us, the nightmare is organizing a conference.
Oh, I'm supposed to bring a nightmare.
Hopefully, will become a dream, not a nightmare.
Wow. Okay.
Cool. So, as Bogi said, we're collecting questions. We have actually 3 questions pre-collected. So I'll start with one of them. It is the following. Do you think that the AI will become close friend with agility? And in brackets, agility as a mindset, not as a method, or it will become its worst enemy?
I think of these as different things. They don't compete with each other. I think of AI as a way of working, and then AI. Sorry, I think of Agile as a way of working, and then AI as kind of a tool. So in an Agile team, I would expect them to use AI to boost their productivity, for example. I don't think of it as like they're either friends or not friends.
Are there any threats somehow, potentially?
Well, of course, there's threats, I guess, in that it's disrupting everything everywhere. So I guess it depends on what you work with, right? If you work as a translator, then you probably need to find a new job. If a text translator, right? For example, there are some jobs that just AI can do incredibly well, and that's not really viable as a job anymore. Or you maybe changing the job. So as a translator, I would maybe oversee the work and maybe do the prompting and kind of build the products and support. But the actual work, that's changing. So I would say, again, depending on what your job is. However, a lot of people are maybe worried a little bit unnecessarily. For example, I do a lot of development. I've been doing programming for many years, and now AI is incredibly good at programming. It's better at programming than pretty much any developer I've ever met, including myself. However, I don't think the developer role is going away. It's just the programming part of it is. So so I think AI replaces many tasks, and if the task is the job, then the job is under threat. But often the task isn't the job. The task is just one part of the job, and by getting help with that, you save a lot of time to do what you really want to do.
But Henrik, a question about development. AI is still not perfect, far from perfect. It makes mistakes, right?
Yes, just like we do.
So how far in the future are you currently making your prophecy, let's say prophecy? Or are you talking about nowadays, or 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now? What is your standpoint right now?
So in terms of usefulness of the technology, it varies a little bit depending on the task. Like I talked about programming, right now, this technology makes me about 10 times more effective as a programmer, even today.
Okay.
And this has been for over a year. So that's already here. And I write, I'll say I write about only 10% of the code. Most of the time it's prompting and tweaking. And same thing with, for example, if I have a workshop or a meeting and I want to just summarize the notes from that, then of course an AI just does that perfectly well, better than a human, faster than a human. So for those kind of things, we're already here. But when it comes to maybe things like visuals, like today, there's no AI model that can design a really good looking presentation yet, for example. There's no AI model that I know that could run a company, right? It can help a person run a company, but it won't run the company. You won't have any good AI Scrum Masters because they don't have legs and feet. They can't walk around. They can't give somebody a hug, and they can't move a sticky note on a wall, and they can't have lunch with somebody. So there's limitations there, right? So depending on the nature of the job, it varies. But I find that even in the current state, AI is useful in almost any job and any role. It's just a matter of to what extent is it just a tool that helps a little bit, and to what extent can it take on a responsibility on its own, and that depends on the job and the task, of course.
So just to develop it a bit, Milena. So you say it's not going to be an enemy. That's okay, but you said it's gonna disturb and maybe it's changing somehow the life. And what's the change or disturbance that you see maybe in the Agile?
Right.
Example for Scrum Masters, for Agile coaches. do you see any change or disturbance that happens now?
Yes, I see a complete disruption of every part of this thing. But if we look at different levels, I think the Agile principles are fairly stable. The ideas of working in cross-functional teams, that's kind of human nature. The idea of working in iterations and getting customer feedback on a regular basis, these things I think are going to continue to make sense. But the practices, I think, are changing a lot. For example, when you have an AI model that is really, really good at coding, you probably don't need a 7-person team just to have all the skills necessary. It's typically enough with maybe 1 or 2 people plus an AI model. Now you have all the skills you need. And that changes the equation. So I think, for example, smaller teams, it's going to be a common thing. You don't need to spend a couple of weeks to develop a few new features when you have these models. Instead, it's a matter of days or maybe even hours. And so I think sprints are going to either disappear or just become incredibly short. Daily stand-up and sprint planning, already now in my life, these are merged. So daily stand-up is a sprint planning because we don't need more than a day to get stuff done typically. So a lot of those kind of things are kind of changing. But also the nature of the roles. Typically, a developer is somebody who is by nature a bottleneck. That's the person who has to write the code. And then a product owner and a customer has to explain what they want and then wait. So you're essentially writing a prompt to a human developer and waiting for them to develop something and then hoping it's going to be good. And if it's an Agile developer, they'll give you stuff along the way. You can give feedback. But now I think the monopoly on coding is disappearing. So for simpler tasks, a customer and a developer together could prompt an AI model and get the code within a few seconds and then give it feedback. So it's a just different way of working. And it's not settled yet. I'm just seeing it changing very fast. When teams start really understanding this technology, then it's like you have to go back and revisit all the assumptions behind all the practices of things like Scrum and extreme programming. But again, I think the principles are probably about the same. We just need to be very open to changing the way we worked.
Okay. Milena, what's your question, or it's already answered?
Not completely. So my question, Henrik, will be more of a, you answered about Agile, but more of a Agile coach or Scrum Master role, because the things are changing. The structure of the teams will change even more. The day-to-day tasks as well. And of course, the tasks and the role that we know today of the Scrum Master and the Agile coach will change. Like 90% of the tasks we know today that these roles are doing probably will disappear. So what would be your advice from all the work that you are currently doing, experimenting, knowing the roles very well, in which 10% of the tasks and the focus of Agile coach today should we focus so that we prepare ourselves for the future?
Right. That's a super, super good question, I think. And again, we're all in this journey together, so I don't really have answers, but I have thoughts and observations. And I think with Scrum Master, you can look at it kind of like with any role. What part of that job is a little bit wasteful? For example, being an information and knowledge bottleneck. In the past, until now, the Scrum Master has been one part of the job has been to be the person who knows about Scrum, and the person people turn to say, like, how do I split a story in a good way, or how do I run a retrospective? And I think one part of it is to just let go of some of that pride, say, you know what, I'm not the one who knows this best anymore. The model knows it better, but I can help bring this tool to the team, and I can prompt it and sometimes double check or critique. So for example, if I'm a Scrum Master in a team now and they come to me and ask, how do I split a user story? I would show them how to prompt an AI model to do that. So basically give them a fishing rod rather than fish. And that way I don't have to spend time explaining Scrum stuff because all the knowledge is already out there. Instead, I would spend more time doing the human stuff, which is maybe talking to people, observing, having lunch, and also the role will reduce. So I also need to think about what else can I do? Because even before AI, Scrum Master was almost never a full-time role. So what are my other skills? And I'll just need to be ready to apply those. Another aspect of it is also that because AI is so disruptive, one of the jobs of us Scrum Master is to be a bit of a change agent, right? And a bit of a guide. So I would say, learn this technology really well. Spend time really exploring what it can do. and then inspire the team to do the same. So to try to create this culture of, here's a new weird thing, and I have no idea where it's going to take us, but it's certainly going to change many things. So let's just think of it as this interesting tool that's going to make us productive rather than this weird threat kind of thing. So that mindset aspect, I think a Scrum Master can help in many ways.
Interesting, Henrik. Maybe I can challenge you on the teaching side, on the Scrum Master role, because you're saying, yes, AI knows all the Agile stuff, have read all the books, your books, all the books about agility, everything. But prior ChatGPT or whatever AI tool there is, the information about what is Scrum, how Scrum is applied, it's free. Everybody can read it. It's not since yesterday. Somebody can tell you what is a daily, how to conduct retrospectives, how to structure retrospectives, everything. This is something we had 10 years ago. It's not something new. But still, many people, at least with those companies that we work with, have no clue what real Scrum is, what is Agile, what are those principles, how they should be applied, frameworks, anything. It's not like people cannot read the information or get the information about them.
Well, either that or they don't care. And then the question is, should they?
What do you think?
I'm not so sure, actually. I've noticed that if I'm in a context where people don't, because I agree with you in the sense that the information has been out there anyway. Google's been around for quite a while, right? Of course, one difference is that it's a bit faster. You can more quickly get the answer now. You don't have to dig through various pages. But I agree that the information has been out there. So I find that if a team is not interested, if they're not seeking the information, then I think the important question is what does a team need from me? And what does a team need from the world? Maybe learning a Scrum isn't the most important priority for them. Then what is it? So kind of always looking at what is the team's motive. And sometimes Scrum could be a tool to help that. Sometimes Scrum doesn't matter and it's something else they need. So I guess as a Scrum Master, think of yourself primarily as a coach, and then the Scrum part is secondary.
Yeah. So my thinking goes in the direction, not that information is available for everybody and ChatGPT could provide it. It's more that we change the structure of teams. And in our teams, we'll have 1 or 2 members and then artificial intelligence helping them being so much more productive. So if our role as a Scrum Master was to create the environment for these teams to become self-organizing, highly functional teams and don't need a Scrum Master at the end, we will start now with 2 people. Do they really need a Scrum Master? And
they don't, right? So
they don't, right? Correct.
That's kind of the but what I think will happen though is if you have when you have smaller teams, you either fire people or you have more teams. That's kind of the mathematics, right?
Actually, there is one other option to make them resolve bigger problems.
That's actually true, maybe. It's just I'm not sure we need so many people like as a working unit. Maybe I don't know, but it's a good point. If you take a cross-functional team and leave it the way it is and just empower them, maybe they just get more stuff done. True. But a little bit of a sidetrack. But one thing I'm naively hoping is that companies won't use this as an excuse just to fire a lot of people. Some companies are already doing that. But what I hope like you guys can help me spread as a message is don't do that unless it's really the only option, right? Okay, sure. If you have 1,000 people working in a help desk and you really only need 10 because of AI, then then you're going to need to fire a lot of people because you can't just pay money for something you don't need people for, right? That's kind of the reality. But for many jobs, like such as developer, it's smart to not just fire people because that makes people not like the technology, right? And they're not going to be inclined to really learn and always improve and use it. They're not going to want to become more productive because that just means my next buddy gets fired. But if instead, when they use the technology and really learn it and share it, they notice that, wow, we get so much more stuff done now. And it's so much more fun to go to work. Then they're going to lean in and want to learn the technology. And I think those companies are the ones that are going to succeed. While the ones that just use it as excuse to fire people are going to struggle because those people will not like the new technology. And we need people to really lean in. So let's just assume for now that we have a company that now has maybe smaller teams. And then by nature, they will probably have more teams, which means you have more coordination to deal with between teams. So that's maybe one place where I would focus more as a Scrum Master. For example, looking more at the system, right? How do these 8 teams synchronize with each other?
Okay. Well, I've read your article about Agile in the age of AI. This is where you share these ideas as well. And when I read it, I had this, let's say, question to you. If we have smaller team, let's say, like you described it, 2 people because they have to make each other company, and AI that is all knowledgeable, almighty. And leaning back to what I asked you earlier, that can we really trust AI giving us the right code and the right answers all the time? Shouldn't the human be intelligent enough and experienced enough first to understand what the AI has given to that specialist, to make that person to be able to read it and understand what it's written, not just like a code monkey copy and paste stuff here and there without any clue what that is, right? Because we had that even before AI. Again, Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is what we had before. You just ask a question, it's not AI, you just scroll more and search more to find the code snippet that you want, and then you tweak it. Now we do it faster with AI, but still you need to understand the output, right? And if you don't understand the output, even if you're 2 people, and the AI is almighty, all knowledgeable, and they ask the AI, give me the best database structure, whatever, just making stuff up, and they cannot read code for database structures. Is it really helping? This is my question. Can they just say, okay, we're going to prompt it and copy paste blindly?
I think to answer your original question, can we trust it? And I'd say sometimes and sometimes not, and that's why we need the humans. That's why those 2 people are there. Because if we could trust it 100%, we wouldn't need the 2 humans either.
But if those 2 humans should be also all knowledgeable?
Not really, because what I find is that like, for example, the code I've been working with my team, the AI is writing most of the code, but we are deeply involved in it. And what happens when you work with this every day is you build up an intuition for when should I just trust the code blindly, and when should I read it carefully, and when should I edit it myself. And that depends both on the complexity of the prompt and the code, and also depends on the business criticalness of it. For example, let's say I'm working on an admin page, right? And I have like, I can edit users and sort them, and now I want to have some way to, let's say, rearrange the view and view in different ways, right? I would just prompt it, and I would use Cursor, which has a built-in AI, right? And there's no copy paste. I'll write a prompt, and I would say, fix this. I'll just describe the problem and ask it to fix it. Maybe I would put a screenshot in. And then I would press apply, and then I would drink a glass of water, and then 20 seconds later, the code is all done. I wouldn't even look at it. I would test it on the page, click it around. It works as it should, and I would just move on, because the models are so capable now that code will just work. However, in other cases, if it's something more business critical, then I would probably look very carefully at the code it produced and maybe make some changes myself. And sometimes if I need to go back, let's say I need to go back to that admin page that it wrote, right? I was there when it wrote it. I know the rough structure of it. I didn't read it in detail. So later on, I can choose. If I need to edit the code, I might ask it, can you explain how this code fits together? Because I need to work with it. Or just ask it to change it again and not look at the code. So I think the difference is, in the past, you as a developer needed to understand every line of code to be able to work with it. Now, you as a developer can choose, you kind of pick your battles. You decide, where do I care, and where will I say whatever? It doesn't matter too much.
Okay, if I understand you correctly, if we take the T-shaped skills model, for example, does it mean that the future engineers or the engineers of the future should focus more on the horizontal line to know more technologies, but not in depth, but just enough to understand the model, what the prompt is producing, and not so much on the vertical axis? Is it what you're saying?
That's actually something I've been wondering myself quite a lot. I'm not quite sure yet, because I'm seeing a bit of both. I'm seeing that now a very wide person without much depth can get incredible amount of work done, because the AI complements their lack of depth, and they learn. So let's say there's a lot of database stuff and they're not experts at it, but they will get better at it just by working with AI. It's like having if I'm a very broad person, but I'm working together with a specialist, that knowledge starts leaking over to me after a while. So that kind of works. But I've also seen the opposite kind of work where you have someone who's really good at, let's say, server-side development, but now they need to do something on the client side. Well, they're not limited by the fact they don't know that because they can ask an AI model to do it. So I think kind of both of those personas will be able to kind of cover up for what they lack for. However, there is one exception I would say, which is if there's some part of our domain that is really critical, right? Let's say we're building something that involves a lot of let's say it's a security critical system, right? And the consequences of security breaches is really large. Sure, a person who doesn't know much about security can get away with getting some help from the AI, right? Please review the security of this code, please fill the gaps. But I would still want to have a specialist in the company, at least somebody who knows this deeply as a person. Because that person can double check what the AI is doing. That person can prompt the AI model. That person can guide the teams as to in which cases can you just trust it, in which cases should you come to me. So I think the specialists is probably needed. It's just that you don't need as many of them. It might just be enough with one, and they don't need to be involved everywhere. They just need to be involved in those more critical cases.
And to be honest, Henrik, in most companies don't have so many super specialists anyways. There is no like a big pool of specialists that you can hire 20 of them. Usually those people are already a limited resource. I hate this word, resource. Limited people, subject matter experts anyways. So,
but one thing I've noticed too is I've seen situations where like me or one of my teammates are like, you know what, this thing that we've been coding, this part of the system that we don't know so much about. Let's say we're not very good at writing automated tests in Python or something, right? Let's say we haven't done that. But because of AI help, we now have lots of really nice tests, right? And we only understand them at a high level. But let's say at some point that, you know what, I want to learn this because we're going to need to write more and more tests, and I feel a bit uncomfortable having all these tests that I don't really know how to maintain. So then sometimes we'll do things like, you know what, let's just take a couple of hours and learn this properly. So then we prompt the model, explain this to me and teach me this properly. Give me a quiz, show me some resources. So now the AI becomes a teacher, but within the context of my actual code. And what I've found is that you learn, like in a day, I can learn as much as I would learn taking a whole course. So I think just the acceleration of learning is also one of the reasons why we can get away with smaller teams.
I think everything that you say can be also applied in the agile roles. So this same learning approach, etc. That's very useful. Now I want to let's say redirect a little bit from the, maybe we'll see, from the AI topic to the second question, which is more about today's reality. So it says the following: are companies slowing down on implementing agile way of work? It feels like the market has changed.
Wow, that's a very big question. So honestly, I would have thought like 10, 15 years ago, I was like, Scrum is dying now.
Okay.
But it's just not, it's not interesting anymore, really. It's becoming kind of commonplace, and a lot of companies do it kind of halfway and then they stop, and it's not interesting anymore. But yet it kind of stuck around. And I keep getting the feeling, that same feeling. So my high level theory when it comes to Agile is that the ideas behind Agile have always been relevant and are always going to be relevant. But the words are just, it's a fashion industry. So the buzzwords come and go, but we're still always going to work more effectively when we work in teams. And we're always going to build better products when we do it incrementally. We're just going to have different words that we assign to it, probably.
So this is maybe something that we have discussed with Bogi before. Do we need to rebrand somehow Agile with some new words or what?
But the way I've been doing it when I've been coaching is I basically de-emphasize all the words. Because I think the principles are more interesting. So when I come to a company and they're like, hey, we want, help us do Kanban or help us do Scrum or whatever it is, it's like I enter the company through a door that has a label on it, right? Maybe it says Scrum Coach, and I come in through that door. But then I don't care anymore. Then it's more a matter of what is the biggest problem you want help with? Oh, our teams are completely out of sync with each other. Okay, how does it work today? And we map out the process, how it works today, and let's talk about it, and let's design an experiment for how to work more effectively. And then all these things, like all these Scrum practices and Scrum of Scrums and these tools, is just like, for me, the tools inside my toolbox that I carry. And it doesn't really matter if I call this tool Scrum and someone else just calls it iterative development and someone else calls it XP. It's just a tool that I'll bring out sometimes. So for example, it's useful to have somebody who's responsible for making sure that we have a clear vision going forward and who can set clear priorities. Maybe we have a person already and it's called a project manager. Fine, right? It doesn't matter. The key thing is what do we need to improve? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. So to me, I don't really care so much about the words because they're just really words.
Okay,
I
and
agree with you on that one for sure.
and is this, I don't know, related, or how do you explain the because the question was, are the companies still going agile, or they're somehow abandon it and they're I don't know. Maybe it's because of this current situation where you see lots of Scrum Masters are laid off. Also, project managers, actually, not only Scrum Masters. So this kind of situation nowadays that happened, I'm sure you see the news. How do you see this
Yeah.
nowadays?
Yeah, it's hard to say because to some extent Agile has become kind of mainstream, so it's not as interesting to talk about. But there is still waterfall happening, right? And it's also still not working very well at all. So like a half-baked Scrum would normally work better than a well-oiled waterfall in my experience. So I think there's some part of it is just human nature. That to people who haven't worked with, for example, product development themselves, in many cases, waterfall looks more appealing. Because it looks like a very clean process, right? You write a spec and then you write a design and then you nail it and you decide on the time and date, and then you implement it and you test it against a specification and you release it and now you're done. It's a very clean process. It doesn't work, but it looks very clean on paper. And Scrum is messier. It's weird, right? We're growing this, the product is like a plant that we're growing, right? And you get a little weed first and then you water it a little bit and you make changes and it grows a little bit more and everything is uncertain. But it's a more honest approach, right? It more honestly describes the messiness of product development. So I think probably it'll continue being like that. Some companies are really good at applying an agile mindset and they'll probably have bigger odds of succeeding. But then there are always going to be very big companies that maybe have a lot of money and maybe don't have a lot of incentive to change. And there's probably still going to be waterfall there as well.
But do you think it's actually kind of, I don't, because I don't have that many observations, but let's say what I have seen is that these companies that abandon the Scrum Master roles, etc., they're not actually going back to waterfall, maybe slightly in terms of providing more plans, okay? But actually they're not going back to waterfall. It's more like going to pure cowboy working, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a... I like to emphasize the Agile principles again, right? Because if you look at the Agile Manifesto, there's no Scrum Master role in there. Scrum Master is just a role, right? It's a tool, and you may or may not need it. In a perfect world, you don't need a Scrum Master because you have a really great leader, right? Who does that? Who does what a Scrum Master would do? So I think in some cases what happens is a Scrum Master was needed to help the company get to an Agile point. But then they weren't needed anymore because now they're working in an agile way and the leaders are doing the coaching as a good leader should. And then maybe you don't need that particular role anymore. And again, I don't think of that as a failure. I think of that as just continuous improvement, always evolving which roles we need and who does what.
Amazing. I have a question to build on top of this, what you're saying, Henrik, about the role of the, let's say, management. We can call it manager, whatever kind of label companies put on the managerial roles.
Yeah.
What do you think is the number one quality or activity or skills that the managers of the future should obtain in order to be effective as compared to today's world?
I guess if we look at on a timeline, what's different is that the world just keeps getting more complex, right? Because we're interconnected through internet and because of the rate of technology development. And now with AI, it's even crazier. So the rate of change and the increasing complexity, if we take that into account, I think, by the way, that's one of the reasons why Scrum and Agile have become, so popular, because they are a way of dealing with complexity. But as a leader, I think one of the differences there is you just need to be very curious. Because whatever you think you know is very quickly getting out of date. So if you're very curious and you can spread that curiosity, I think that's very helpful.
Okay, and what else?
I would say that's an interesting question. I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on that too. So I gave you one. Now you give me one.
Okay. Well, what we discussed with Nicola, we were discussing also about the future, etc. And we believe that companies, organizations, in order to achieve business agility, this for us means that the organization is one organism, should tackle challenges that are unforeseen. Sometimes big challenges, sometimes not so big, but organization should be able to tackle those challenges as quickly and as efficient as possible, and even absorb these challenges and see them as growth opportunities or competitive advantage opportunities. And in order to do this, okay, AI can help, but in order to do this, the organization should be able to collect the, let's say, everybody's brains in the company, like a big brain trust, and work together and do their best based on their context, based on their understandings, knowledge, constraints, whatever, to do the best possible solution. So our thoughts were leading towards that the management or leaders of the future should be able to create high-performing teams on the fly. And this is an ability that I think, and we believe with Nicola, is going to be most needed one. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I guess I would want to be a bit more concrete then. What is it? What skill is it that helps them build, high-performing teams? And I think that hasn't changed so much. Like basic things like the ability to set a clear goal that the team can align against, but also not telling the team how to reach that goal. That balance of this is where we need to go, but you guys figure out the how. That's super valuable, and it's a tricky balance to find.
It's definitely a set of skills. It's not just, but we just say, okay, build teams because we see it like there is a challenge, and some I don't know, not random, but some, let's say, concrete number of people in the organization that can influence that problem needs to gather quick together to form a unit, and this unit should start working in some close to high performing state. And if there is a person dedicated to help them do it, this person should be very skillful in exactly that, bringing quickly a group and forming high performing unit.
Yeah, and it's not just enough to tell them this is the goal, this is what we want to achieve, figure it out how you do it. And if those people have no way to collaborate together, work together, they're not really a team, but just a bunch of people with skills.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not going to be hoping for the best, I assume.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, and a tough one. But if I look at, but just kind of from personal experience, when I look at leaders that I thought were very successful, I think, for example, Daniel Ek at Spotify, I was very impressed by his way of leading, especially in the early days. This little startup that was competing against these massive companies with infinitely more money and people and everything, and yet Spotify kept out innovating everybody, and I thought that was really amazing. And what he was good at was clarity. This is the most important problem we need to solve right now, and this is why it matters. But then also trusting the team, letting them find their own way to solve it, and not controlling them too much, because a lot of the best solutions that teams found were things that he couldn't have imagined himself, and there are a lot of failures along the way. And if he had punished the teams or pressured them or tried to control them, then we wouldn't have that level of innovation. So I have a huge respect for leaders that can find that balance of super clear goals, but then let the teams kind of do their thing.
Cool. There is another question in the set of the preset questions, but it's a bit different, so I'll leave it for now. So is there a question here from the group? Sue, Milena, Stoyan, do you have any question that you want to ask Henrik?
I mean, maybe just to say on this topic, which is really interesting around the Scrum Masters. So the organization that we're currently coaching at fired all their Scrum Masters, and actually, which was interesting, and pulled the principal engineers in to run the role. And they're doing it, and it works. But obviously, the level of agility is not as deep as it would be as if you had somebody focused on it. But, organization looks at this and thinks, well, I've saved all this money. But still the teams could probably do much better than they are. Then, of course, that means that the next level of coaching is also a problem. So agile coaches will also be at a risk. Why do you need them? If the Scrum Masters are gone, do you need coaches? And my thinking is that probably the coaches will turn more into business coaches. So agility is always in engineering, but actually the organization needs to get agile. So probably our role, Henrik, to your point is, yes, there's lots of things that can be replaced, but the people skills cannot be. So it's having those conversations, taking leadership on a journey, those kind of things, I think is probably where we'll start moving into, I think.
Yeah, there's a general trend, I think, of firing agile coaches. And I think that what's happening there is basically the reasoning kind of makes sense if you think about it. People are like, listen, we have these leaders who have a job to lead and they're accountable, and we have the teams that are building stuff. And we have this coach who has a bunch of opinions but no responsibility. What if the leader does what the coach does instead? Right?
Great.
Because then they're also responsible for the results. And that logic, there's some sense to it if you think about it.
Okay, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for your
Cool. Tuyan, do you have a question? You're the... Maybe not. Milena, do you have a question?
Well, I have a question. It's more of a, Henrik, about if we try to look at the future, and if we say, if a company today has a team of 5 team members, and in the future, near future, they will have 5 teams. So they will be 5 times faster and more productive. What will happen with this complexity? So they will produce features 5 times faster to the market, and will be able to, for the same time, produce 5 times more things to the market. So how we are going to, can we envision today what will happen?
It's anyone's guess, right? But it's also a question of when people get more productive, it doesn't necessarily mean they're developing more features. For example, it could be that they are spending more time iterating on the things they've already done, and making it better, for example, or building just other product lines that are independent. So there are all kinds of ways it could go. But it's true that, of course, if we produce more stuff, then there's a risk that we just create a lot of complexity. Of course, AI can help us with that to some extent, but it's definitely a risk, and we need to be mindful of that and not just think about, now we're just going to make a bunch of stuff and pretend that there's no such thing as maintenance. But I think also, if you think in the long term, it's also interesting. Like, if we take the software as an example, I think it's interesting to think about, what does the world look like where software is free? Right? Where software is something that just gets created when you need it for that purpose. So nobody's building features because you just conjure it when you need it. Just like if you need to write a document, you just write it, you just create it. And I don't have an answer to that, but I think we should be thinking along those lines a little bit, like what that means.
Interesting. So to the last question that we had before the session, I'll try to add a bit on it, because it's the following. What's your opinion on disciplined agile toolkit? So what's your opinion on any toolkits that we have or appear and will appear in terms of the future? How do you see this stuff?
What is disciplined agile toolkit?
That's a good answer to the question. What do you think about it?
Well, you asked me about opinion. I don't know what it is, so we have to start with that.
I think it's the PMI. I believe it is the PMI thing that they bought recently. Like a couple of years ago, they bought a framework that was called DAD, and they named it to Discipline Agile. So I think this is it.
Okay. Well, I don't know anything about it, so I really don't feel capable of having any. I'm just opening perplexity right now to ask, like, what is disciplined agile toolkit.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Perplexity is basically GPT and Google had a baby. So it's AI powered search. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. Foundation layer, discipline, DevOps layer, value streams layer. I just hope it doesn't become another safe. That's my only worry. But
it's PMI thing. So
Well, apparently we should switch the question, I believe.
let's move on.
so what about any toolkits in terms of frameworks, tools, and of course certifications for them? How do you see this?
To me, all of this is tools. So I'm all for tools. You just got to be careful with not having too many. What sometimes happens is when you take a toolkit, let's say, for example, if you take Scrum as a toolkit, but it's a rather small toolkit, kind of minimalistic. And then you have Safe, which is a very huge toolkit. And then you kind of drown in tools and not get anything done. So the balance there, right? Tools are great, but use them carefully and don't just take a whole bunch of tools and pour them on the team.
What about all the certifications that we have? What do you think about it?
Certification is kind of interesting, and it's weird. Like I teach certified Scrum Master courses since way back, and people, they always sell better than non-certified courses, even though they're the similar content. So it seems like when companies want to send people to a course, if it says certified something or other, they'll be more likely to send people there. That just seems to be, I don't know why, it's a human nature thing. So I guess there's always going to be certifications around the various levels of seriousness.
Wording matters.
What?
So wording matters. I mean, if there is certification, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't have a very much strong opinion either way. I think it's just a little bit human nature that people want to know, they get the nice fuzzy feeling that this is a better course because it's certified, although it, in many cases, doesn't make much of a difference.
If you ask me why I'm asking that question, because discussing with other people about the current state, layoffs, agile coaches, scrum masters struggling, we were discussing that maybe one of the reasons for that situation is that at some point the community didn't decide, are we creating something that is making business better, or we're certifying people? What are we doing here? And trying to do the two, I think, brought us maybe one of the reasons to bring us here, where we are, that actually no one wants Scrum Masters, for example.
Right. Yeah, I think my guess is that it's unrelated.
Is it?
If I think if people don't want Scrum Masters, that just means we should rethink what is the value we're providing, and that's completely independent of what certifications or not. It's just a matter of, okay, people don't want to hire a person who's called a Scrum Master. Then the question is, what is this person bringing to the table, and why is that not considered valuable? And if so, what can I do instead? So we should all be thinking about, how do I add value to my customer? And if this is not it, then what is it? Like,
okay. To what Nicola points said, I have my personal views and experience as well. I have worked with people who were not trained properly being coaches or agile coaches or Scrum Masters. What they did was going to a certified Scrum Master course, got their certificate in 2 days, and claiming proudly, I'm a certified Scrum Master, I know it all, and go to their teams being the Scrum Master and terrorizing them with Scrum, the way they understood it. And those people sometimes are uncoachable because they kind of have this feeling, this view of themselves that they are now masters, they can do whatever. And those people are same as the others who have invested years into trying, into learning, reading, experimenting. But for the business, the two kinds or the two groups look the same.
Yeah, it's the same with many roles. Like, for example, someone can call himself a developer, and they could be completely new, or someone can have worked for 40 years. Someone can call themselves a project manager or a cook, and there's no rule saying that you need to be a good cook to call yourself a cook. So yeah, I think that's a general problem. How do you determine if someone is good at their job?
Exactly.
And what is the majority? This is also maybe a key part here.
What is the majority?
Is it from the good cooks or from the bad ones?
Yeah.
If the majority is the bad cooks, you'll stop using cooks.
But there is only one, I think, one additional aspect of the problem is that when a company decides to try Agile, to invest in agility, Agile, whatever, Scrum, transition, they hire such people with not so much experience without knowing what a good Scrum Master should look like. And they hire them and they don't see the real value out of them. And this kind of creates bad names even for the good ones, because they cannot assess their own. They cannot assess.
But there's also the aspect of how do you become a good Scrum Master? You do it by gaining experience. So you have to start as a bad Scrum Master, or else you don't become a good Scrum Master, kind of.
Yep.
So
exactly.
I think with any skill, there needs to be an acceptance that some people are learning, and it can be a journey.
Yeah.
Oh, so 1 hour is almost over. So let me see. Are there any other comments, questions, any wrap up from anyone here?
Just to say thank you very much. It was really interesting. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
It was really great.
Yeah, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I'm just throwing ideas around and seeing what sticks.
Great.
Thanks for organizing. Very good.
Milena, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yes, just to thank you as well. Yes, I would like to talk more about the future and try to predict, but yes, some other time next year when you come to our conference, we can dig deeper.
This famous quote, right? It's hard to predict things, especially the future.
Exactly.
There is one website, I forgot now its name, but it's having snippets of predictions of bright people from the end of 18th centuries.
Yeah.
They are predicting 1 year later what will happen, so you can check there. They're interesting predictions. Actually, pretty much nothing is what these people were thinking about. Like everyone will have own dirigible or something like that. But still, thanks, Henrik. It was really a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. It was an honor to see you, to get to know you, because this is the first time we meet for me as well. Nicola, I know you met Henrik back in the day. And you're one of my idols. So yeah.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for spending time for this session with us and with our audience. I think your thoughts are very valuable and interesting, and we'll see how things are going to unfold in the next year. Let's see. Yeah. And yes, as Milena said, we're inviting you to take part in the Agile Business Agility Conference in Bulgaria, next edition next year. Sue is one of our honored speakers.
Cool.
So she's going to be there this year, maybe next year as well. We don't know.
You never know.
But yeah, have a great conference. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers.